Hey everybody, hope you're having a great day. If you have the paper book, I'm right in the middle of page 198. Otherwise, just follow along. Our reward money for returning Gladiola, the poodle, had only been enough to purchase tickets as far as Denver. We couldn't get berths in the sleeper car, so we dozed in our sleeps. My neck got stiffer. I tried not to drool in my sleep since Annabeth was sitting right next to me. Grover kept snoring and bleeding and waking me up. Once he shuffled around and his fake foot fell off. Annabeth and I had to stick it back on before any of the other passengers noticed. "So," Annabeth asked me, once we've gotten Grover's sneaker readjusted, "who wants your help?" "What do you mean?" "When you're asleep just now, you mumbled, 'I won't help you.' Who are you dreaming about?" I was reluctant to say anything. It was the second time I'd dreamed about the evil voice from the pit. But it bothered me so much I finally told her. Annabeth was quiet for a long time. "That doesn't sound like Hades. He always appears on a black throne and never laughs." "He offered my mother in trade. Who else could do that? I guess if he meant help me rise from the underworld, if he wants war with the Olympians, but why ask you to bring him the Master Bolt if he already has it?" I shook my head, wishing I knew the answer. I thought about what Grover had told me. What the fairies on the bus seemed to have been looking for something. Where is it? Where? Maybe Grover sensed my emotion. He snorted in his sleep, muttered something about vegetables, and turned his head. Annabeth readjusted his cap so it covered his horns. "Percy, you can't barter with Hades. You know that, right? He's deceitful, heartless, and greedy. I don't care if his kindly ones weren't as aggressive this time." "This time? You mean you've run in them before?" Her hand crept up to her necklace. She fingered a glazed white bead painted with an image of pine tree, one of her clay and summer tokens. "Let's just say I've got no love for the Lord of the Dead. You can't be tempted to make a deal for your mom." "What would you do if it was your dad?" "That's easy," she said. "I'd leave him to rot." "You're not serious." Annabeth's gray eyes fixed on me. She wore the same expression she'd worn in the woods at camp, the moment she drew her sword against the hellhound. "My dad's his enemy since the day I was born, Percy," she said. "He never wanted a baby. When he got me, he asked Athena to take me back and raise me on Olympus because he was too busy with work. She wasn't happy about that. She told him heroes had to be raised by their mortal parents." "But how... I guess you weren't born in a hospital?" "I appeared on my father's doorstep in a golden cradle, carried down from the Olympus by Zephyr, the west wind. You'd think my dad would have remembered that as a miracle, right? Like maybe he'd taken some digital photos or something. But he always talked about my arrival as if it was the most inconvenient thing that ever happened to him. When I was 5, he got married and totally forgot about Athena. He got a regular mortal wife and 2 regular mortal children and pretended I didn't exist." I stared out the train window. The lights of a sleepy town were drifting by. I wanted to make Annabeth feel better, but I didn't know how. "My mom married a really awful guy," I told her. "Grover said she did it to protect me, to hide me in the scent of the human family. Maybe that's what your dad was thinking." Annabeth kept worrying about her necklace. She was pinching the gold college ring that hung with the beads. It occurred to me the ring must be her father's. I wondered why she wore it if she hated him so much. "He doesn't care about me," she said. "His wife, my stepmother, treated me like a freak. She wouldn't let me play with her children. My dad went along with her. Whenever something dangerous happened, something that when monsters, they would look at me resentfully, like, 'How dare you put my family at risk?' Finally, I took the hint. I wasn't wanted. I ran away." "How old were you?" "Same age when I started camp. 7. "But you couldn't have gotten all this way to Half-Blood Hill by yourself." "Not alone, no. Athena watched over me, guided me toward help. I made a couple of unexpected friends who took care of me for a short time anyway." I wanted to ask what happened, but Annabeth seemed lost in sad memories. So I listened to the sound of Grover snoring and gazed out the train windows as the dark fields of Ohio raced by. Toward the end of the second day on the train, June 13th, 8 days before the summer solstice, we passed through some golden hills and over the Mississippi River into St. Louis. Annabeth craned her neck to see the golden arch, which looked to me like a huge shop bag handle stuck on the city. "I want to do that," she sighed. "What?" I asked. "Build something like that. You ever see the Parthenon, Percy?" "Only in pictures. Someday I'm going to see it in person. I'm going to build the greatest monument to the gods ever. Something that'll last 1,000 years. I laughed. "You? An architect?" I don't know why, but I found it funny. Just the idea of Annabeth trying to silently quiet and draw all day. Her cheeks flushed. "Yes, an architect. Athena expects all her children to create things, not just tear them down like a certain god of earthquakes I could mention." I watched the churning brown water of the Mississippi below. "Sorry," Annabeth said. "That was mean." "Can't we work together a little?" I pleaded. "I mean, didn't Athena and Poseidon ever cooperate?" Annabeth had to think about it. "I guess. The chariot," she said tentatively. "My mom invented it, but Poseidon created horses out of the crest of waves, so they had to work together to make it complete." "Then we can cooperate too, right?" We rode into the city, Annabeth watching as the arch disappeared behind the hotel. "I suppose," she said at last. We pulled into the Amtrak station downtown. The intercom told us we had a 3-hour layover before departing for Denver. Grover stretched before he was fully awake, and he said, "Food." "Come on, goat boy," Annabeth said. "Sightseeing." "Sightseeing?" "The Golden Arch," she said. "This may be my only chance to ride to the top. Are you coming or not?" Grover and I exchanged looks. I wanted to say no, but I figured if Annabeth was going, we couldn't very well let her go alone. Grover shrugged. "As long as there's a snack bar without monsters." The arch was about a mile from the train station. Later in the day, the lines to get in weren't that long. We threaded our way from the underground museum looking at covered wagons and other junk from the 1800s. It wasn't all that thrilling, but Annabeth kept telling us interesting facts about how the ark was built. Grover kept passing me jelly beans, so I was okay. I kept looking around, though, at the other people in line. "You smell anything?" I murmured to Grover. He took his nose out of the jelly bean bag long enough to sniff. "Underground," he said distastefully. "Underground air always smells like monsters. Probably doesn't mean anything." But something felt wrong to me. I had a feeling we shouldn't be here. "Guys," I said, "you know the god's symbol of power?" Annabeth was in the middle of reading about construction equipment used to build the arch, but she looked over. "Yeah? Well, Grover cleared his throat. "We're in a public place. You mean our friend downstairs?" Right," I said. "Our friend way downstairs. Doesn't he have a hat like Annabeth's?" "You mean the Helm of Darkness?" Annabeth said. "Yeah, that's his symbol of power. I saw it next to him to his seat during the winter solstice council meeting." "He was there?" I asked. She nodded. "It's the only time he's allowed to visit Olympus the darkest day of the year. But his helm is a lot more powerful than my invisibility hat, if what I've heard is true." "It allows him to become darkness," Grover confirmed. "He can melt into shadow and pass through walls. He can't be touched or seen or heard, and he can radiate fear so intense it can drive you insane or stop your heart. Why do you think all rational creatures fear the dark?" "But then, how do we know he's not right here now, watching us?" I asked. Annabeth and Grover exchanged looks. "We don't," Grover said. "Thanks, that makes me feel a lot better," I said. "Got any blue jelly beans left?" I'd almost mastered my jumpy nerves when I saw the tiny elevator car we were going to ride in to the top of the arch. I knew I was in a lot of trouble. I hate confined places. They make me nuts. We got shoehorned into the car with a big fat lady and her dog, a chihuahua with a rhinestone necklace. I figured maybe the dog wasn't seeing eye chihuahua because none of the guards said a word about it. We started going up inside the arch. I'd never been in an elevator that went up in a curve. My stomach wasn't too happy about it. "No parents?" the fat lady asked. She had beady eyes, pointy, coffee-stained teeth, a floppy denim hat, denim dress that bulged so much she looked like a blue-jean blimp. "They're below," Annabeth told her, scared of heights. "Oh, the poor darlings." The chihuahua growled. The woman said, "Now, now, sonny, behave." The dog had beady eyes like the owner, intelligent and vicious. I said, "Sonny is his name?" "No," the lady told me. She smiled as if that cleared everything up. As the top of the arch, the observation deck reminded me of a tin can with carpeting. Rows of tiny windows looked out over the city on one side and river on the other. The view was okay, but if anything, I liked less than a confined space. It's confined space 600 feet in the air. I was ready to go quick. Annabeth kept talking about structural supports and how she would have made the windows bigger and designed a see-through floor. She probably could have stayed up there for hours, but lucky for me, the park ranger announced that the observation deck would be closing in a few minutes. I steered Grover and Annabeth towards the exit, loaded them into the elevator, and I was about to get in myself when I realized there was already 2 other tourists inside. No room for me. The park ranger said, "Next car, please." "We'll get out," Annabeth said. "We'll wait with you." But that was going to mess everyone up and take more time, so I said, "Nah, it's okay. I'll see you guys at the bottom." Grover and Annabeth both looked nervous, but they let the elevator door slide shut. Their car disappeared down the ramp. Now the only people left in the observation deck with me, a little boy with his parents, the park ranger, and the fat lady with her chihuahua. I smiled uneasy at the fat lady. She smiled back, her forked tongue flickering between her teeth. Wait a minute. Forked tongue? Before I could decide if I'd really seen that, her chihuahua jumped down and started yapping at me. "Now, now, sonny," the lady said. "Does this look like a good time? We have all these nice people here." "Doggy," said the little boy. "Look, a doggy." His parents pulled him back. The chihuahua bared his teeth at me, foaming and dripping from his black lips. "Well, son," the fat lady sighed, "if you insist." Ice started forming in my stomach. Did you just call the chihuahua your son?" "Chimera, dear," the fat lady corrected. "Not a chihuahua. It's an easy mistake to make." She rolled up her denim sleeves, revealing that the skin of her arms was scaly and green. When she smiled, I saw her teeth were really fangs. The pupils of her eyes were sideways slits like a reptile's. The chihuahua barked louder. With each bark it grew, first to the size of a Doberman, then to a lion. The bark became a roar. The little boy screamed. His parents pulled him back towards the exit, straight into the park ranger, who stood paralyzed, gaping at the monster. The chimera was now so tall, its back rubbed against the roof. It had a head the size of a lion, with a blood-caked mane, and the body and hooves of a giant goat, and a serpent tail, a long, 10-foot-long diamondback growing out of its shaggy behind. The rhinestone collar still hung around its neck, and the plate-sized dog was easily to read now. "Chimera rabid, fire-breathing, poisonous if found. Please call Tatras extension 954. I hadn't even uncapped my sword. My hands were numb. I was 10 feet away from the chimera's bloody maw, and I knew that as soon as I moved, the creature would lunge. The snake lady made a hissing noise that might have been laughter. "Be honored, Percy Jackson. Lord Zeus rarely allows me to test a hero with one of my brood, for I am the mother of monsters, this terrible Ichthya." I stared at her. All I could say, "Isn't that kind of an anteater?" She howled, her reptilian face turning brown and green with rage. "I hate it when people say that. I hate Australia, naming that ridiculous animal after me. For that, Percy Jackson, my son shall destroy you."